Distinguished Presidents of the Academy, Distinguished Chancellor, Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, brothers and sisters, we've been called together to the Caput Mundi for a remarkable event, to support with bright thoughts the worldwide dialogue led by the Church on the protection of God's creation in its entirety, on the complex relationships between God, man and nature as the foundation of universal progress. In the course of 2 days, we'll devote ourselves with love and mutual respect to the big questions about the meaning of life and the grandeur of human dignity. There exists no prescription for the true meaning of life, but it certainly is, however, creation, freedom and reinforcing human justice, which is also God's justice. The meaning of life is man's spiritual feat, moral improvement and sublimity on the way to human progress in mastering nature in such a way so that the grace can be universal and the joy with life's triumph over death can be complete. This is how the psalmist has introduced the theological realization of creation and are placing it in Psalm 8 of the Old Testament. What is man, that thou art mindful of him, and the Son of Man, that thou visitest him? For thou hast made him a little lower than the angels, and hast crowned him with glory and honor. Thou madest him to have dominion over the works of thy hands. Thou hast put all things under his feet. For us, the only beings capable of self-awareness, God has set an exceptional purpose: to safeguard the earthly world, to keep improving it through conscious work, elated by virtue and dignity, and with care for our neighbor in their pains and joys. We, humans, are minuscule particles in the universe. We are, however, an integral part of it and united with it as matter, as spirit, and as an advancement. By our dominion over the works of God's hands, we bear the responsibility for ushering the world to a new phase. I do hope that during those 2 days in the month of June, we'll be able to demonstrate that our thoughts and deeds can help improve the world at least a little bit, just as when we administer justice in defense of human dignity. I hope that openly and sincerely we'll talk about the joys and pains of today. Let us raise a voice in prayer against the gravest humiliations that debase human dignity, harm the honor, and deprive human beings of their creative freedom in the name of peace and goodness, truth and harmony. We live in a world of unprecedented progress and heaps of untold wealth. We have endowed man with countless rights. Some people even enjoy an almost infinite freedom and mobility, while millions keep living in rightlessness and in no man's land. Countries and societies are tightly interrelated, yet sometimes that brings about pressures and vulnerability. Regretfully, we believe less and less that united we stand stronger, and we trust less and less the institutions we've established for ourselves. Rivalries and animosities across the world give rise to injustice and grave inequalities. Millions have been deprived of essential goods and lead lives deprived of dignity. They're uprooted from their native land and forced into mass migration despite the apparent dangers it entails. Ethnic, religious and social conflicts abound. Despite the global food surplus, not only does famine jeopardize the survival of entire nations, but it is also an affront to the grandeur and sacredness of the human person. Children keep dying of starvation. Therefore, If concern for the need to feed ourselves is a material issue, then the concern for feeding our neighbors is a spiritual issue. We have witnessed degradation and disintegration of statehood, radicalization and extremism in frightening proportions. Deep social fractures have separated by an unbridgeable chasm a small portion of society that claims to be the holder of power. Groups and networks of lobbies hold privileged positions in society and stand as centers of political power, influence and control. Deep social inequalities, greed, alienation, chaos and violence act as powerful catalysts of social discontent and crisis. The feeling of insecurity is growing dramatically. New outbursts of intolerance and hostility are triggered and added to the existing ones. Politically motivated violence is on the rise. At the glamorous forums, the elites make no mention of corruption, hypocrisy, political falsity, and demagogy that have grown to the point of making the world dangerously divided and bent. It is with heavy hearts that we've been following news about new outbursts of human suffering, disease, and poverty. Organized crime, aided by brutal corruption, successfully attacks entire economic sectors and destroys entire social systems. Because of the weakening relations between people and the loss of strength of statehood, organized crime groups find it easier to impose their values and order. They see and treat human beings as objects. The Internet and powerful communication technologies are used to recruit trafficking victims. One world rises against another. Trafficking in human beings is a business, and we, lawyers, tend to shyly theorize and ask ourselves whether slavery exists today and how we could possibly counteract it. In the very first Bulgarian constitution of 1879, adopted after our liberation from the Ottoman rule, the Bulgarian lawmakers elaborated a remarkable provision. Nobody in the Principality of Bulgaria reads the Constitution shall be entitled to buy or sell human beings. Any slave of whatever gender, religion or nationality shall become free once they set foot on Bulgarian territory. On the basis of that provision of Article 61 of the already repealed Bulgarian Constitution, in 1881, a local court found the transaction between two Romanians null and void as it related to the exchange of land for Roma farm slaves. Likewise, the Principality of Bulgaria's first criminal law act of 1896 provided for a punishment of 5 to 10 years in solitary confinement for anyone who deprives another person of freedom and sells them as a slave inside or outside the country. Today we ask ourselves, what happened to humankind between the 19th and the 21st century? Have we known the truth now that we have acquired freedoms? For truth and freedom always go hand in hand and exist together and intertwined. In its 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the UN sets the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development as a main goal. The agenda is premised on human dignity. For all reasonable people who keep their hearts open for the ethos of humanism, sustainable development can have only one historic and cultural direction. It bears one single meaning: to live together in a peaceful and prosperous world where acrimony, insult, humiliation and violence do not prevail. To fight modern slavery and protect its victims, the global community of criminal law scholars and practitioners has elaborated a series of instruments, conventions, directives, protocols, national laws and mechanisms for support and financial compensation of victims of crime, as well as catalogues of child rights, regulations and guidelines to help trafficking victims. Various committees and agencies have been put in place. Trafficking human beings has been prohibited under the European Union Charter of Fundamental Rights, as well as under Article 83 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. Researchers point to a number of deficiencies of international instruments adopted throughout the 20th century, such as inaccurate and biased definition of trafficking, ignoring the specifics of exploitation and its connection to criminal markets, or the effectiveness of victim protection instruments. In the beginning of the new millennium, a wide range of new documents, protocols, framework decisions were adopted. In 2007, the Council of Europe Convention against Trafficking in Human Beings entered into force. The gradual harmonization of criminal legislation of the Council of Europe member states before 2011 paved the way for a comprehensive legal instrument on human trafficking. That's Directive 2011/36 of the European Parliament and the Council of the 5th of April 2011. However, all legislative efforts and numerous structural reforms pale in comparison to the chilling statistics. According to the first report of the European Commission on the progress made in the fight against trafficking human beings of the 19th of May this year, in 2013 and 2014 alone, 15,846 trafficked victims were identified and 1,029 convictions were given. Data show that less than half of the victims reported their case to the police and sought protection. At least 15% of the victims are children. They suffer sexual abuse and labor exploitation, including begging, pickpocketing and prostitution. Trading in bodily organs cannot be ruled out in the cases of child trafficking. Infants are the object of sale, in some cases even before they're born. 76% of victims are female, the prevailing majority of them being young women. Human trafficking deprives human beings of their free will and reduces them to objects of ownership rights. Trafficking in human beings is part of the big issue of universal progress and the peaceful survival of humankind. It is irreconcilable with the values of a democratic society. There's no other value but the human being, human life, health, inviolability, freedom and dignity justify the most potent of repressions, the criminal repression. Stripping human beings of their social characteristic features is tantamount to transforming them into commodities, which is nothing short of slavery. No other criminal offense appears to be capable of generating victims to such an extent. Victims' position of dependence crushes any resistance to evil and kills any thirst for life. Worst of all, human trafficking oftentimes shapes victims' attitudes and makes victims believe that slavery is a normal way of life. Thus, a value system parallel to the rule of law develops. Lives deprived of choice are lived. Trafficking in human beings is one of the most monstrous forms of organized crime, supported by high-level corruption. Not all legal systems treat slavery as a serious encroachment upon human dignity. I subscribe to the view of those criminal law scholars and practitioners who find sufficient grounds for the criminalization of modern slavery as a general offense related to the special offense of human trafficking, notwithstanding of the practical need for the society. I'm fully aware of the numerous arguments and reasons against such an understanding. Despite all arguments for and against that approach, I believe it would nonetheless provide additional safeguards for the warning and deterrence of usurpers of the right to freedom and human dignity. Moreover, it would also facilitate international legal cooperation. I'm convinced that aiding and abetting, attempting and preparing to force someone into slavery and human trafficking should also be criminalized. In addition, let us once again remind ourselves that strategies and specific child protection policies, particularly as regards unaccompanied minors, are of paramount importance today. Joint actions are required by the governments, the church and the civil society. Effective juvenile justice policies, coupled with reliable child protection measures, are also needed. The judicial community is put to the test before its professional conscience, before humankind and God. Political elites through their legislatures, so are the political elites through their legislatures. Let us stand together against slavery that forces human beings into submission, rightlessness, and subjects them to inhuman treatment. Distinguished colleagues, brothers and sisters, my mind slips back to the question, what is man? What is the meaning of life? Where do we humans stand today? How do we rule on earth, since God did not subject the coming world to angels, but subjected all things under our feet? Here is the man, a martyr with crown of thorns. We want to live a life where good is good only if achieved through good means. A life geared towards the upcoming human greatness by the resurrection of Jesus Christ, that is a symbol of life over death. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Vice President.